we're now in the fourth generation of this. And they're now getting these multiple personality disordered people to multiple personality disorder the next generation. The control are now controlling the next generation of control. And I have to say, because I think it's important that some of the people who claim to be New Age gods and New Age channelers of this, that, and the other, multiple personality controlled people, and what they are channeling is programmed into them. And I'd say this, just my view, for anyone in what we call the New Age. If anyone is going around saying, I'm channeling this or I'm channeling that, and it has to do with handing over large amounts of money, or it has to do with you must believe this and pressure to be obedient to that, and consequences if you don't. And I've just come across something exactly like that down just south of Seattle in the last few days. And the alarm bell should go. Because if people are beginning to open up, are beginning to go beyond the sheep mentality, these people that wish to control en masse are not going to walk away from that. They're going to want to divert the people who are waking up into another cul-de-sac. And people like this are used to do that. Just my view, I think there's a lot of, or some New Age big names and UFO big names that aren't actually what they seem. And I don't think, myself, they actually know what the situation is, because if they're in this state, there's no way they'll know. So when events happen, this is another thing I think to keep in mind. And when Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips come along in April, I think they've got a session there where they'll be able to take loads and loads of questions and go into it in a lot more detail than I've been able to. It's certainly a very big thing and a very big element in this. The mind-controlled person, the mind-controlled robot, in short. Okay, we'll take some questions now. About anything or whatever. Yeah. How do I feel about the Iron Mountain report? That's a very interesting question, which takes us into two areas, really, particularly. The question was about something called the report from Iron Mountain. It's something I go into in detail in And the Truth Shall Set You Free. For anyone who's not come across it, during the 60s, from about 63, 62 maybe, across to when it reported in about 66, a group of, I think it was 15 experts in various fields were brought together by this hidden hand under the auspices of the United States government to produce a report on how to control the population and centralize power without further recourse to wars, which is how it's been done in the past. And it was called the Report from Iron Mountain because, as I understand it, Iron Mountain is an underground facility in New York State, and they met there for the first and last meetings, hence it got that name. It appears that one of the number leaked the report to a friend who leaked it more widely. And what's interesting, when you look back, it was reported in 66, is two of the recommendations in that report for centralizing power and controlling the population. One, a global threat to the environment. That reported in 66. In 1968 came something called the Club of Rome, which is linked into the Bilderberg Tri-African Mission Council on Foreign Relations Network, and was set up by the same people that set them up. The Rockefellers and what have you, Rothschilds, people like that, towards the top of the pyramid, though not at the top of the pyramid. And if you look at what the Club of Rome did and its reports and stuff like that, it really started the environmental movement totally. Now, like I say, I was, well, was said earlier, I was involved in the British Green Party as a national spokesman for a few years before I realised that while it spoke a good story, spoke a better story, it actually worked like all the others. At which point I said, thank you, I'm on. But I was involved in environmental campaigning during the 80s. And it's not that there isn't an environmental problem. And it's not that there isn't something to be addressed. The question is, as I document in the book, why is it that all the major global environmental reports saying there's an environmental problem, something must be done, have been funded by the same people who are dismantling the world's ecology? Who was the first head of the United Nations Environment Agency? Maurice Strong, Canadian oil millionaire, as I understand it, very, very close to the Rockefellers. Who was the head of the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil? Maurice Strong. Who was the guy who was the real compiler of something called Our Common Future, which got the name of the Brundtland Report because it was fronted up by Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Prime Minister of Norway, but it was actually written by a guy called Jim McNeill, another Canadian who is a very close associate of Maurice Strong. Global 2000 Report to the President was written and compiled by people like Cyrus Vance, the Trilateral Commission Council on Foreign Relations. And what have been the solutions to this environmental problem? More and more transnational laws that are overpowering national law. In Europe now, big time. And yet, the people who are putting these reports forward and funding them are the same people that are suppressing technology that would remove the need to use fossil fuels and poison the planet. They have that technology already. They just won't let us have it because it suits the way things are. So it's not, I mean, I hear, again, black and white, some of the Christian Patriot movement, they do a fantastic job incidentally down in America getting three-dimensional information out. But they say things like, all environmentalists are communists. I used to be an environmentalist. I still am an environmentalist. I've never met a communist environmentalist. But again, it's that. There is nothing more manipulatable than genuineness that ain't streetwise. And so you've got the few at the top of the environmental movement who are manipulating the genuine people, not communists, below them, by creating the problem and then urging them to demand a solution. And what was the next thing in the report from Iron Mountain under a threat to the global environment? 1966, this was a threat from an extraterrestrial civilization, which is what I think is now being wound up to be. Because one of the key areas of our lives which this global elite control absolutely is Hollywood. Control it completely. It has been one of their greatest forms of global conditioning. If you ask most people around the world, I guess, for a certain version of a historical event, the chances are they'll give you a Hollywood version. Hollywood's rewritten history, isn't it? Now, I had my intelligence insulted last autumn when I had nothing better to do, and I trotted into a cinema and I watched Independence Day. Have you seen it? First of all, who made it? 20th Century Fox. Who owns that? Rupert Murdoch. Who owns it? They do. And you've got all these different programs now starting to appear. They are in Canada, but they certainly are elsewhere, which are creating fear-based reactions to extraterrestrials. I can see a scenario, certainly a possible one, whereby we are sold the idea of some extraterrestrial invasion. I can hear the announcements now. Yes, we have to admit that there has been a holding back, not a cover-up, a holding back of information about our knowledge of extraterrestrials' activity because we didn't want to cause a global panic. But we have now reached the stage where the situation is so dire that we have to tell you that we believe there is a possibility of an invasion by an extraterrestrial civilization. And of course, at this grave moment in the history of planet Earth, we call for a collecting together, fusing together of military resources to meet this threat and a coming together of political resources to organize our response to this. Well done. Well done. Thank you very much. And when you see, it might sound kind of crazy, but when you see what happened in 1938 when Orson Welles was claiming to be broadcasting from the scene of a Martian landing, when he was broadcasting from a radio studio with special effects, all hell broke loose and the place was supposed to be what it wasn't. The manipulative possibilities of this whole scenario are enormous, especially when you have technology which is beyond anything we see like the space shuttle, and therefore they can fly these things around and you give it, well, it must be extraterrestrial because there's nothing like that on Earth. Who says? I was talking to a guy called David Adair, who's now starting to speak out. I've still got, but he's saying some very interesting things, not least about one piece of technology they have, which they tell us about, and that's the ability to make craft completely invisible. Not just radar invisible, but completely invisible. And he said they've had it for some time. It's very straightforward. I mean, he's a technological genius, He's making rockets as a kid, the type. And he said what they do is we see things three-dimensionally because they reflect light back. So that we've developed a technique that bends light around an object so it reflects nothing back. So three-dimensionally you can't see it, just be manifested when you see it. And he said we've developed suits that can do the same for a human being. Isn't that right? Yes, it is. And he was talking down this whole Life Expo in Seattle, just knocking around the technology that exists that we don't know about. It's absolutely incredible. But when you've got that, we don't know it, then it's fantastic. I mean, what do people say? They have these horrendous things done to animals in fields. They say, look, whatever was done to that animal couldn't have been humans. We don't have that technology. No, we don't know we've got that technology. I mean, are we still naive enough to think that we are allowed to see state-of-the-art technological development at the moment they reach it? Of course not. Knowledge, ignorance equals control. So I don't have a problem with extraterrestrial life. I think the idea that when you look at the sky, that we're the only planet that has evolved anything like life is off the wall, from my perspective. I have no problem with the fact that there's quite possibly extraterrestrial activity going on at this time of some kind. And I actually believe myself that what we call the missing link in the development and evolution of the human body, when there was a big jump and no apparent reason for it, was extraterrestrial intervention. So I had no problem with any of that. But it is a manipulator's dream also, and I think it is being used to a very large extent. And again, the question keeps coming back, who benefits? And if who benefits is an excuse to centralize power, I think it's time for the alarm bells to ring. Take another look. Yeah. Right. Well, I think myself at this time, although that's just my view, that if anyone is claiming to name the people here right at the peak, I think they're very, very unique researchers and or maybe deluding themselves. Certainly you can name some people who are visible if you do the research within this. The House of Rockefeller, the House of Rothschild, and others. And like I said, I think earlier, the key is the bloodlines. For some reason, They're immensely keen to maintain the bloodline. Now, as these people, the last thing they are is stupid. Spiritual desert, because they close the heart chakra down. That's what they actually do to their kids, the Illuminati families. They close their heart chakras down, and they use techniques to develop their intellect. So by the time the baton's handed over to the next generation, you've got people who have been brought up to be very intellectually developed, very in the head, but the heart chakra is shut down, so they've lost touch with their multidimensional self and who they really are, pure love. And so you've got the mad professor syndrome, where someone who is intellectually almost completely in the head will do horrendous experiments on live animals, but whereas if they were in the heart as well as the head, the heart would say, excuse me, that may be possible, it might even on one level be interesting, but it's totally unacceptable. And so when the head is in the driving seat and the heart is in the trunk, then you've got a very imbalanced situation, very imbalanced behavior, very imbalanced perception, but the last thing they are is intellectually stupid. As Kathy O'Brien says about Bush,